The movie begins by showing Robert, a retired CIA secret agent who's now enjoying his retirement days. He lives alone in a regular apartment and works at a building store. Robert has a cheerful and playful personality, making him well-liked by his coworkers. One of his closest work buddies is a big guy named Ralphie. They often have lunch together, and Ralphie seeks Robert's advice on diet because he dreams of becoming a security officer. Being the good friend he is, Robert shares diet tips that Ralphie can follow. Ralphie greatly admires Robert's discipline, so he always turns to him for advice. Aside from being disciplined, Robert also loves reading books, even while he's on the go. But the most interesting thing about Robert is his obsession with time. He uses a stopwatch on his watch to count everything he does because he doesn't want to waste his golden years. However, there's one problem in Robert's life. He suffers from acute insomnia. Even at midnight, he struggles to fall asleep. To deal with this, Robert visits his favorite tea shop near his house. He always brings his own tea when he goes there. In the shop, he strikes up conversations with a lady named Terry, a regular visitor. Although they've met many times, they haven't formally introduced themselves. Yet, they bond over Robert's favorite novel. Terry claims to be a singer, but in reality, she works as a commercial sex worker. One evening, Robert and Terry run into each other once more at their favorite tea shop. They have a chat about the novel Robert has been reading and enjoy each other's company. But their pleasant moment is interrupted when Terry's phone rings, and she answers a call from a man named Slavy. It turns out that Slavy is a Russian mobster involved in the terrible business of trafficking young girls, including Terry. He tells her to serve a customer who's been waiting outside the shop. Terry really doesn't want to help this customer because he seems like a horrible person. However, she feels trapped and compelled to do it because she needs the money urgently. It's a tough situation for her to be in. Seeing Terry looking gloomy, Robert couldn't help but feel a bit suspicious. But he didn't want to pry or get involved, so he decided to just let it be and ignore the situation. A few days later, Robert continued to assist Ralphie in his weight loss journey. He coached Ralphie in sports and trained his muscles so that Ralphie would be ready for the security guard selection. One night, after not seeing each other for a few days, Robert spots Terry again. This time, Terry's face looks injured, as if she had been hit. But when Robert tries to ask about it, she avoids the topic. Despite this, Robert decides to cheer her up and gives her some food as a gift. Surprisingly, they both decide to sit together at the same table. During their conversation, Terry reveals her real name, Alina. As they get to know each other better, Alina gives Robert a DVD of her singing. They continue chatting, and Robert opens up about being a widower. The atmosphere between them feels comfortable and warm as they keep talking and strolling around the city until late at night. Eventually, Slavy shows up and takes Terry away. He scolds and hits her, leaving Robert unsure of what to do. He doesn't intervene, not knowing the full story. After putting Terry in his car, Slavy approaches Robert and hands him his business card, assuming Robert is a potential customer for Terry's services. Since that night, Robert never sees Terry again. Then one day, the tea house owner informs him that Terry is in the hospital, suffering from severe injuries caused by Slavy's abuse. Concerned, Robert rushes to visit Terry at the hospital and meets her friend, Mandy, who is also working for Slavy. Mandy reveals the horrifying truth about Slavy and his gang's cruelty. After his visit to the hospital, Robert is torn between seeking revenge on Slavy for what he did to Terry or trying to buy her freedom by paying a ransom. One night, Robert finally makes up his mind and decides to confront Slavy at a bar owned by the Russian gang. However, when Robert tells Slavy that he wants to redeem Terry and is willing to pay a significant amount, around $9,800 or about $147 million, he is met with laughter. The sum of money Robert offers is substantial, but Slavy and his gang still find it amusing that he thinks he can buy Terry's freedom. Even though Slavy rejects the money and advises Robert to forget about Terry, something inside Robert changes. As he stands at the doorstep, he acts strangely, opening and closing the door 3 times before locking it. With a calculating gaze, he assesses the situation, sizing up Slavy and his gang. In that moment, Robert feels an overwhelming surge of confidence, realizing he can take them down in a matter of seconds. Without hesitation, he decides to take matters into his own hands and launches a brutal attack on Slavey and his men. Robert's estimation turns out to be accurate, and he manages to take down all of them within just 28 seconds. Remarkably, he comes out of the fight without a scratch. As Robert approaches the dying Slavey, he admits that he made a mistake in judging people. If only Slavey had accepted the money, Robert wouldn't have resorted to killing him. With Slavey's last breath, Robert expresses remorse and seeks forgiveness from God for the sin he committed. The following day, Robert resumes his regular routine at work, acting as if nothing had happened. He also takes the time to encourage Ralphie, who is about to take the security officer tests. Despite the recent events, Robert remains focused on helping his friend. When Robert gets home from work, he sees the news reporting the death of the gang leader, Slavey. Surprisingly, the police don't suspect Robert at all. Instead, they believe the massacre was carried out by a rival gang. On the other hand, a new mobster named Teddy, also known as Ricky, arrives in the United States to represent his boss, Puskin. Ricky's mission is to find out who killed Slavey. To conduct the investigation, Ricky forces a corrupt cop named Martis to help him. Martis had been bribed by Slavey before to protect his illegal business. Now, Martis has no choice but to assist Ricky in his search for the killer. The following day, Robert becomes worried when he finds out that Ralphie didn't take the security officer exam as planned. He decides to visit Ralphie's mom's restaurant to check on him. When he arrives, he's shocked to see the place in disarray. Ralphie explains that there was a fire, and he's been helping to clean up and repair the damage. Concerned for his friend, Robert decides to lend a hand in the restoration efforts. In the meantime, Ricky and Martis continue their investigation, confronting various rival gangs, including one led by John, who is Irish. Ricky tries to ask for information about Slavey's killer in a casual manner, but John refuses to cooperate. In the end, things take a violent turn, and Ricky ends up killing John during the confrontation. As the night falls, Ricky begins to have doubts that Slavey's murder was carried out by an enemy gang. Meanwhile, Puskin urges Ricky to swiftly find the real culprit to ensure their business remains unaffected. Ricky feels the pressure to solve the case and appease his boss. On the other hand, Robert uncovers the truth behind the fire at Ralphie's mom's restaurant. He discovers that 2 corrupt cops were responsible for the sabotage. These crooked officers had been extorting money from the locals for protection, but Ralphie's mom refused to pay up. Out of spite, the evil cops intentionally set the restaurant on fire. Showing concern for his friend, Robert secretly records the conversation of the 2 corrupt cops. When the cops try and apprehend him, Robert swiftly uses his fighting skills to neutralize them in just 5 seconds. Thanks to Robert's intervention, the 2 cops agree to return the money they extorted from Ralphie's mom. A few days later, Ricky pays a visit to Mandy's house, seeking information about Terry and anyone who might have seen her recently. Mandy shares that a black man came to the hospital asking a lot of questions about Terry. Without any hesitation, Ricky proceeds to strangle Mandy from behind after obtaining the information he wanted. The situation takes a dark and violent turn as Ricky is determined to find out more about Terry's whereabouts. In the end, everything seemed to be going well for Robert. He was happy playing baseball with his work friends, while Ralphie achieved his dream of becoming a security officer in the building store. After their game, Robert returned to work as usual. However, things took a sudden and dangerous turn when Robert found himself in a tense situation. A man pointed a gun at his co-worker, Jenny, at the cashier's counter. Robert considered taking action, but he hesitated because a young boy had entered the store at that moment. To protect everyone's safety, Robert decided to hand over all the money from the register, including Jenny's gold ring, to the robber. Despite handing over the money and Jenny's ring to the robber, Robert doesn't let the incident slide. He quickly memorizes the robber's car plate and reports the incident to the police, determined to bring the criminal to justice. Robert also takes the time to comfort Jenny, assuring her that the incident wasn't Ralphie's fault as a security officer. He wants to ease any feelings of guilt or responsibility his friend might have. Afterwards, Robert takes matters into his own hands and goes to the back of the store to fetch a hammer. He then chases after the robber and confronts him, managing to overpower and beat him up. Once the robber is subdued, Robert returns Jenny's ring to her and carefully places the borrowed hammer back where it belongs on the shelf. The next day, Ricky meticulously reviews all the CCTV footage near Slavy's bar and spots a man who matches Mandy's description, Robert. Ricky quickly hatches a plan and disguises himself as a local cop to visit Robert's house. However, Robert pretends to be clueless about the deaths of Slavy and Mandy, keeping his guard up during the conversation. Despite his pretense, Robert knows that Ricky is dangerous and will stop at nothing to uncover his true identity. He realizes the risks he's facing and starts preparing himself for whatever may come. Robert is well aware of Ricky's extensive network in the United States, making him even more cautious. Later in the evening, Ricky sends a hitman disguised as an electrician to the Tay house with the intention of killing Robert. But Robert is quick to detect the disguise, and he defends himself effectively, managing to kill the hitman with just a book, using his resourcefulness and skills to survive the attack. After the confrontation at the Tay house, Robert takes Ricky and the corrupt cops to an isolated area. There, he hides himself and proceeds to beat up one of the evil cops. He also takes their phones to prevent them from calling for help. Once back home, Robert tends to the wound on his leg from the fight. Meanwhile, Ricky and his men follow Robert to his house, but to their surprise, he's nowhere to be found. Robert had a secret room in his house, equipped with hidden cameras, allowing him to monitor Ricky and his movements. Frustrated with Ricky's pursuit, Robert decides to visit his old friend Susan. Susan is revealed to be a former high-ranking official in the CIA's secret agency, living in a secluded area with her husband, Brian. Surprisingly, Robert had previously faked his own death, but now he resurfaces with a determined mission to take down the Russian mafia. He seeks Susan's help for information about Ricky and his gang. Susan willingly provides Robert with details about Puskin, Martis, and Ricky. She even shares that Ricky is actually a former Russian Special Forces officer named Nikolai. Armed with this crucial information, Robert decides to stay at Susan's house, though he finds it hard to sleep. When Susan asks Robert why he would go to such lengths, even faking his death, just for a girl he recently met like Terry, Robert can't provide a straightforward answer. He can't explain his strong conviction, but he feels deep down that his actions are the right thing to do. His determination to protect Terry and bring down the Russian mafia drives him forward, no matter the cost. Robert seeks permission from Susan to take matters into his own hands and eliminate the person responsible. Brian initially wants to help, but Susan forbids it, recognizing that Robert doesn't want to burden anyone else. Later, Robert sets his plan in motion. He first encounters Martis and hides in the man's car garage, ambushing him when Martis returns. Robert locks Martis inside the car and threatens to use the gas hose to kill him unless he cooperates. Initially resistant, Martis eventually surrenders and decides to help Robert. He comes to realize that he's facing someone who seems almost supernatural, Robert, the Angel of Life. Shortly after arriving at Puskin's factory, Martis leads Robert to meet Andrew, one of Puskin's men. From the start, Andrew looks wary of Robert and points his gun at him. But Robert's quick reflexes enable him to disarm Andrew and take control of the situation. Andrew and his men become afraid of Robert's capabilities, leaving them in a vulnerable position. Taking advantage of the fear he instilled, Robert uses the opportunity to disrupt Puskin's illicit business. He deliberately distributes some of Puskin's money to the employees working at the factory. This further undermines Puskin's operations and sends a message that Robert is a force to be reckoned with. Robert chooses not to kill Martis, realizing that he was once a good cop who fell into a life of corruption due to financial struggles. Instead, Martis decides to redeem himself by providing Robert with all the evidence of his crimes involving the Russian gang. With the evidence in hand, Robert hands Martis over to the police, who arrive shortly after. Martis is arrested, and he hopes to make amends for his past mistakes. As for Andrew and his men, Robert locks them up in a warehouse, making it easier for the police to apprehend them and dismantle Puskin's criminal operations further. Sometime later, Ricky is seen having dinner with a hitman he hired to find Robert. However, shortly after the hitman leaves, Robert suddenly appears, carrying the man's damaged and blood-stained glasses. It becomes evident that the assassin Ricky hired is dead before he could take any action. Robert calmly sits down in front of Ricky and begins to speak at length. He offers Ricky a chance for redemption, just as he did with Martis. Robert tells Ricky that he won't kill him if he's willing to repent and change his ways. To demonstrate his sincerity, Robert gives Ricky his phone number and gives him until the next day to make a decision. If Ricky insists on continuing down the path of crime, then Robert will take it as a challenge and respond accordingly. After the encounter with Ricky, Robert heads back home with a crucial mission in mind. He gathers evidence of human trafficking and promptly delivers it to an FBI agent named Mosley, hoping that justice will be served to those involved in this heinous crime. But Robert's mission doesn't stop there. He takes matters into his own hands once again and heads straight to the port to sabotage Puskin's illegal activities. With a bomb in hand, he sets out to destroy Puskin's oil ship, dealing a significant blow to the Russian mafia's operations. The situation becomes dire as Ricky refuses to back down. He takes everyone at the building shop, including Ralphie and Jenny, hostage. Realizing the danger they are in, Robert rushes to his workplace to confront the situation head-on. While Robert is on his way, Ricky orders his men to shoot at the bus that Robert is on, trying to prevent him from reaching the building shop. The situation takes a dramatic turn as Robert takes swift and decisive action. With the element of surprise on his side, he manages to take down Ricky's men one by one, using the sound of music as a distraction. Robert is relentless and unyielding in his pursuit to save Ralphie and the other hostages. When the warehouse lights go out, Robert cleverly sets up traps to incapacitate Ricky and his remaining men. His determination to protect his friends and seek revenge for their actions drives him to eliminate the threat posed by the Russian gang in a cold and ruthless manner. Robert's skills and resourcefulness are on full display as he takes control of the situation, making sure to free the hostages and dismantle Ricky's criminal operation. The situation becomes even more intense as Ricky manages to shoot Robert in the shoulder. However, the injury doesn't deter Robert, and he continues to fight with remarkable determination and resourcefulness. Using a drill as a weapon, he takes down more of Ricky's men. As the fight escalates, Robert decides to engage in hand-to-hand combat to face the threat head-on. Despite being injured, he fights fiercely. However, Ralphie intervenes to help Robert, but he also gets shot in the leg in the process. Seeing his friend injured, Robert becomes even more determined to finish off Ricky and his men once and for all. He unleashes his full force, fighting with everything he has, until there is no one left standing. Robert then executes a clever plan to set up a bomb using a gas cylinder, ensuring that Ricky's gang is completely wiped out. The explosive end to the confrontation leaves no survivors among Ricky's men, and Robert's mission to seek justice and protect his loved ones is achieved. In a last-ditch effort to escape, Ricky sets a trap using Ralphie as bait to lure Robert out. However, Robert arrives just in time to protect his friend. With swift and precise action, Robert shoots Ricky using a nail-shooting device, neutralizing the threat. Despite the danger he faced, Robert remains resolute in his mission to protect those he cares about and bring down the Russian gang. He shows no mercy towards Ricky, knowing that he must eliminate this dangerous figure once and for all to ensure the safety of himself and his loved ones. The film concludes with a powerful and intense climax as Robert travels to Moscow and confronts Puskin directly. He skillfully eliminates Puskin's guards and inflicts a fitting punishment on the Russian mobster, using electricity to make him suffer for his crimes. After successfully taking down Puskin and dismantling the Russian gang's operations, Robert is finally able to reunite with Terry. She expresses her heartfelt gratitude for Robert's unwavering support and assistance in helping her escape her previous life as a sex worker. Terry shares that she has now retired from that life and is working towards her dream of becoming a successful singer. With the love and support they have for each other, Harry and Robert look forward to building a bright future together. The film ends on a hopeful and heartwarming note, as the kind-hearted widower and the resilient woman he rescued prepare to embark on a new journey together. The moral of the story is to not mess with a book-reading, time-counting, and baseball-playing hero. He'll outwit you and save the day.